The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawns of Adelaide Cottage as Queen Camilla's black Range Rover pulled up to the entrance. She had made this journey countless times before, always welcomed with warm smiles and open doors. Today would be different in ways she could never have imagined. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had been struggling with her health for several months. The news had been kept relatively quiet, shared only with close family members and a handful of trusted staff. She needed rest, peace, and time away from the constant demands of royal life. Adelaide Cottage had become her sanctuary, a place where she could focus on recovery without the weight of public scrutiny bearing down on her every moment. Camilla stepped out of the vehicle, her cream coat perfectly pressed, her jewelry catching the light. She carried a small basket of homemade biscuits, something she thought might bring comfort to her daughter-in-law. The relationship between them had always been complicated, layers of history and expectation creating an invisible barrier that neither seemed able to fully cross. But Camilla genuinely wanted to help, to show support during this difficult time. As she approached the cottage door, a figure stepped forward from the shadows near the entrance. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the unmistakable uniform of the Royal Protection Command. His face was expressionless, professional, trained to show nothing that might reveal the thoughts behind his eyes. He had been given clear instructions that morning, instructions that came directly from Prince William himself. Camilla smiled at the guard, expecting him to step aside as they always did. She had been queen consort for years now, accustomed to doors opening at her approach, to staff bowing their heads in respect. But the guard remained perfectly still, his feet planted firmly on the ground, his hands clasped behind his back in a stance that communicated one clear message. He was not moving. The smile on Camilla's face faltered slightly. She took another step forward, assuming perhaps he simply hadn't recognized her vehicle or hadn't been informed of her visit. These things happened occasionally, small miscommunications in the vast network of royal household management. She cleared her throat gently, preparing to announce herself. Before she could speak, the guard's voice cut through the quiet afternoon air. His tone was respectful but firm, carrying the weight of authority that came with his position. He looked directly at her, making eye contact in a way that left no room for misunderstanding. What he said next would change the dynamic of the royal family in ways that would ripple through the coming weeks. The guard spoke, clearly and without hesitation. He told the queen consort that she could not enter the cottage at this time. The Princess of Wales was resting, and strict orders had been given that she was not to be disturbed by anyone. No exceptions had been mentioned. No special provisions had been made. The instructions were absolute, and he was bound by duty to follow them precisely. Camilla felt a flush of heat rise to her cheeks. She had faced many uncomfortable moments in her years of public life, weathered storms of criticism and judgment that would have broken lesser people. But to be stopped at the door, to be denied entry to see a family member, felt like a public rejection that cut deeper than any newspaper headline ever had. She tried to maintain her composure, her voice steady as she explained that she had brought gifts, that she only wanted a brief visit, just a few minutes to check on Catherine's well-being. The guard listened politely, but did not waver. His orders were clear. The princess needed complete rest, complete privacy. Medical professionals, it emphasized the importance of minimizing stress and unexpected visitors. Behind the closed doors of Adelaide Cottage, Catherine lay in bed, completely unaware of the confrontation taking place just meters away. She had finally fallen into a deep sleep after days of restless nights filled with worry and discomfort. William sat in the adjacent room, working quietly on his laptop, grateful that his wife was finally getting the rest she so desperately needed. The tension at the entrance was palpable. Camilla's security detail watched the exchange with growing concern, unsure whether they should intervene or remain at a respectful distance. The royal protection officer stood his ground, his training allowing him to handle even the most delicate situations with calm professionalism. He knew this moment would likely be reported back to his superiors, possibly even discussed in meetings at the highest levels of royal household management. Camilla looked past the guard toward the cottage windows, hoping, perhaps, to catch a glimpse of movement, some sign that might justify her persistence. But the curtains remained still, the cottage silent, except for the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. She felt a mixture of emotions swirling inside her, frustration mixed with genuine concern, embarrassment tangled with a growing sense of being deliberately shut out. She made one final attempt, her voice taking on a slightly sharper edge. She reminded the guard of her position, of her relationship to the family, of the fact that she had every right to visit a family member who was unwell. The guard listened respectfully, then repeated his earlier statement almost word for word. The princess was resting, and his orders were to ensure she remained undisturbed. No exceptions could be made, regardless of who was asking. The standoff lasted several more minutes, though it felt much longer to everyone involved. Palace staff watching from nearby windows would later describe the scene as one of the most awkward they had ever witnessed. The queen consort denied entry to a royal residence, standing outside like any ordinary visitor who had arrived at an inconvenient time. Finally, Camilla made the decision to leave. She placed the basket of biscuits on a small table near the entrance, asking the guard to ensure they were delivered to Catherine when she woke. Her voice was tight, controlled, but those who knew her well would have recognized the hurt beneath the surface. She turned and walked back to her vehicle, her posture perfect, her head held high despite the sting of rejection, as her Range Rover pulled away from Adelaide Cottage. Camilla stared out the window at the passing countryside. Questions raced through her mind. Had William given these specific orders? Did Catherine know about this? Was this a deliberate message being sent, or simply an overzealous protection officer following standard protocol? The uncertainty was perhaps worse than any clear answer might have been. Inside the cottage, Liam received a quiet phone call from the head of security. He was informed of what had just transpired, of how his stepmother had been turned away at the door. William listened without interruption, then thanked the officer for following his instructions precisely. He had made the decision deliberately, knowing it would cause hurt feelings, but believing it. It was necessary to protect his wife's recovery and their family's privacy during this vulnerable time. News of the incident spread through royal circles with remarkable speed. By evening, senior staff members at Buckingham Palace were whispering about the confrontation at Adelaide Cottage. Some saw it as a necessary boundary being set by a younger generation of royals determined to do things differently. Others viewed it as an unnecessary slight that could deepen existing tensions within the family. King Charles learned of the situation during his evening briefing. His private secretary delivered the news carefully, watching the monarch's face for any reaction. Charles said nothing at first, simply nodding to acknowledge that he had heard. The relationship between his wife and his eldest son had always required careful navigation, and this incident threatened to complicate matters significantly. That evening, Charles made a phone call to William. Father and son spoke for nearly an hour, their conversation ranging from Catherine's health to family dynamics to the challenges of balancing personal needs with public expectations. William explained his reasoning calmly and clearly. Catherine needed protection from all sources of stress, even well-meaning family members. The doctors had been explicit about the importance of rest and minimal stimulation during her recovery period. Charles understood his son's position, but gently suggested that perhaps a phone call to Camilla, explaining the situation, might help smooth over hurt feelings. William agreed to consider it, though both men knew that such conversations were never as simple as they seemed. Every interaction within the royal family carried layers of meaning, every word analyzed and interpreted through the lens of decades of complicated history. Meanwhile, Camilla sat in her private sitting room at Clarence's house, a cup of tea growing cold on the table beside her. She had replayed the afternoon's events dozens of times in her mind, each replay bringing fresh waves of emotion. She had genuinely wanted to help, to offer support during a difficult time. Instead, she had been made to feel like an intruder, someone whose presence was not only unwanted, but actively harmful. Her laddie-in-waiting knocked softly and entered, offering a sympathetic presence without pushing for conversation. Camilla appreciated the quiet companionship, the understanding that sometimes silence was more valuable than any words of comfort. She wondered if she should have handled the situation differently, perhaps called ahead or sent a message requesting permission to visit. But she was family, wasn't she? Shouldn't family be able to visit without needing formal appointments? Back at Adelaide Cottage, Catherine woke from her long sleep, feeling more refreshed than she had in weeks. William brought her soup and bread, sitting beside her bed as she ate slowly. He mentioned nothing about his stepmother's attempted visit, seeing no reason to burden her with information that might cause stress or guilt. Catherine needed to focus entirely on her recovery, not worry about family politics or hurt feelings. The children were being cared for by their nanny, kept on their regular routines to provide stability during their mother's illness. Prince George had asked several times when his mother would be well enough to play with them again. William always gave the same answer, honest but optimistic. Soon, he promised. Very soon. The children accepted this with the resilience that young people often possess, though William could see the worry in their eyes when they thought no one was watching. The following morning brought unexpected complications. A tabloid newspaper had somehow gotten wind of the incident at Adelaide Cottage. The story was buried on page 7, but it was there nonetheless. The headline read in bold letters about tensions within the royal family, about the Queen consort being denied access to visit the ailing Princess of Wales. The article was short on facts but long on speculation. As such pieces always were, the palace press office went into immediate damage control mode. Official statements were prepared, carefully worded to acknowledge Catherine's need for privacy and rest. Without explicitly confirming or denying the details of Camilla's attempted visit, the delicate dance of royal public relations played out across multiple platforms. Trying to shape the narrative before it could spiral into something more damaging, Camilla read the newspaper article over breakfast, her jaw tightening with each paragraph. She felt exposed, her private moment of rejection now public fodder for millions of readers to dissect and judge. Calls came in from friends offering support, but their sympathy only reinforced how humiliating the entire situation had become. She had worked so hard over the years to be accepted, to prove herself worthy of her position. And now this. Charles attempted to bridge the growing divide with phone calls to both William and Camilla, trying to help each understand the other's perspective. To William, he emphasized that Camilla's intentions had been genuine, that she truly cared about Catherine's well-being despite their sometimes complicated relationship. To Camilla, he explained the immense pressure William was under, trying to protect his wife while managing public expectations and his own fears about her health. Neither conversation resolved the underlying tensions. William remained firm in his belief that he had made the right decision, that protecting Catherine's recovery took precedence over anyone's feelings, including his stepmother's. Camilla heard Charles's explanations but felt that understanding intentions didn't erase the hurt of being publicly turned away like some unwelcome stranger. The royal protection officer who had stopped Camilla at the door found himself called into a meeting with his superiors. They needed to understand exactly what had transpired, what orders he had been given, how he had interpreted and executed those orders. He explained everything clearly and professionally, producing documentation that showed his instructions had come directly from Prince William's office. He had simply done his job, following protocol to the letter as he was trained to do. His superiors assured him he had acted appropriately, that no disciplinary action would be taken. But they also made clear that this incident had created a difficult situation that would require careful management at the highest levels. The officer left the meeting feeling vindicated, but also aware that he had somehow become a small part of a much larger family drama that stretched back decades before he had ever joined the royal protection command. Catherine remained largely unaware of the storm brewing around her attempted visit from Camilla. William had made the conscious decision to shield her from this information, at least until she was stronger and better able to handle the emotional complexity it might bring. He spent his days managing the fallout while maintaining a calm, supportive presence for his wife and children. Friends of both Camilla and Catherine began choosing sides. Though most tried to remain diplomatic and supportive of both women, some argued that Camilla had every right to feel hurt, that family should always come first regardless of circumstances. Others insisted that Catherine's health was the priority, that protecting a recovering person's peace was more important than observing traditional. Courtesy to other family members, the incident became a topic of conversation at dinner parties across London society. Everyone had an opinion about who was right and who was wrong, about what this meant for the future of the monarchy, about whether old wounds between Camilla and the younger royals would ever truly heal. The royal family had always been a source of fascination and speculation, but this felt different somehow. More personal and raw than the usual carefully managed public narrative. Deep within the corridors of power at Buckingham Palace, senior advisors debated how to handle the situation going forward. Should they arrange a formal reconciliation meeting? Should they issue a more detailed public statement? Should they simply let the story die naturally, hoping that time and silence would allow hurt feelings to fade? Each option carried risks, and none guaranteed a clean resolution to the underlying family tensions. As days passed, the immediate crisis began to settle into an uncomfortable new normal. Camilla continued her public duties with her usual grace and professionalism, showing no outward sign of the hurt she carried privately. William focused on his family, his protective instincts running even stronger than before. Charles tried to maintain relationships with all parties. Though he felt the strain of being pulled in multiple directions by people he loved. 3 weeks after the incident at Adelaide Cottage, Catherine felt strong enough to leave her bed for longer periods. She began taking short walks in the private gardens, William always nearby in case she needed support. The fresh air and gentle exercise were helping her recovery, bringing color back to her cheeks and strength back to her body. She knew nothing of the family turmoil that had erupted during her most difficult days. William watched his wife's progress with profound relief. Every small improvement felt like a victory. Proof that his decision to create such strict boundaries around her recovery had been the right choice. He had no regrets about turning his stepmother away, even though he understood it had caused hurt and created complications. Catherine's well-being was his priority, and everything else came second to that fundamental truth. One afternoon, as Catherine sat in the garden reading, William received a text message from his father. Charles wanted to bring Camilla for a visit the following weekend. Proper family gathering to check on Catherine and hopefully begin healing some of the wounds that had opened during her illness. William stared at the message for several minutes, considering his response carefully. He walked into the garden and sat beside Catherine, watching her face in the soft sunlight. She looked so much better than she had weeks ago, but still fragile in ways that worried him. He mentioned his father's request casually, trying not to make it sound like a significant issue. Catherine looked up from her book, surprise evident in her expression. She had not been expecting visitors, had not realized that family visits had been restricted during her recovery. William explained everything then, slowly and carefully. He told her about Camilla's attempted visit, about the guard turning her away, about the hurt feelings and newspaper articles and family tensions that had followed. Catherine listened without interrupting, her face showing a complex mixture of emotions that William found difficult to read. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Finally, Catherine spoke. She thanked William for protecting her when she had been too weak to protect herself. But she also expressed sadness that her illness had caused such division within the family. Despite the complicated history between herself and Camilla, Catherine had no desire to be the cause of ongoing conflict. She suggested that perhaps the time had come to allow visitors to begin slowly rebuilding the normal rhythms of family life. William was hesitant, but agreed to consider it, sent a careful message back to his father, not committing to the weekend visit, but opening the door to the possibility. Charles responded immediately with gratitude and relief. Visit would be brief and low-key, just a simple family gathering with no pressure or expectations. Camilla would bring flowers and nothing more. No attempts to discuss the past incident or dredge up hurt feelings. The days leading up to the planned visit were filled with nervous energy. Palace staff prepared Adelaide Cottage for guests, ensuring everything was perfect, while also maintaining the peaceful atmosphere that had supported Catherine's recovery. William found himself second-guessing the decision repeatedly. Worried that stress from the visit might set back his wife's progress, Catherine reassured him gently but firmly, insisting she was ready for this next step. Camilla spent considerable time choosing what to wear for the visit, changing outfits 3 times before settling on something casual and understated. She wanted to appear approachable, warm, non-threatening. The flowers she selected were carefully chosen as well. Nothing too elaborate or showy, just a simple bouquet of Catherine's favorite blooms. She rehearsed potential conversations in her mind, trying to prepare for various scenarios that might unfold. Charles provided steady support to his wife during these preparations. He understood the courage it took for her to return to a place where she had felt so publicly rejected. He also knew how important this visit was for the family's future. If Camilla and Catherine could find a way to move forward with genuine warmth and mutual respect, it would go a long way toward healing deeper divisions within the royal family. The morning of the visit arrived with clear blue skies and moderate temperatures. Charles and Camilla made the drive to Adelaide Cottage together, their conversation light and deliberately avoiding any discussion of the upcoming meeting. When they arrived, the same royal protection officer was on duty. This time, he stepped forward immediately to welcome them, opening the door with a respectful nod and a small smile that suggested he was glad. This particular chapter was reaching a better conclusion. William met them at the entrance, shaking his father's hand and kissing his stepmother on both cheeks in the traditional manner. The gestures were formal but not cold, a careful balance between family warmth and maintained boundaries. He led them through to the sitting room where Catherine waited. Dressed casually but elegantly, her posture straight, despite the fatigue she still felt after any exertion. The moment when Catherine and Camilla made eye contact felt charged with unspoken history and emotion. But Catherine rose from her chair with genuine grace, moving forward to greet her guests. She accepted the flowers from Camilla with a sincere thank you, commenting on how beautiful they were and how thoughtful Camilla had been to remember her favorites. The tension in the room seemed to ease slightly with these simple exchanges. They sat together in the comfortable sitting room, conversation flowing more naturally than anyone had anticipated. Charles asked about Catherine's health with genuine concern, and she answered honestly about the challenges of recovery and the relief of feeling stronger each day. Camilla listened attentively, asking gentle questions, but being careful not to pry or push too hard for details that Catherine might not want to share. At one point, William excused himself to check on the children, leaving the 3 others alone together. The conversation continued without awkwardness, touching on lighter topics like the gardens, upcoming family events, and small anecdotes about the children's recent activities. Catherine found herself relaxing in a way she had not expected, realizing that Camilla was making a genuine effort to be supportive without being overwhelming. When tea was served, Camilla took the opportunity to speak more directly. She acknowledged, carefully and without drama, that her previous attempt to visit had been poorly timed. She had not understood the full extent of Catherine's need for complete rest and isolation during the worst of her illness. She expressed regret for any complications her actions had caused, but she stopped short of a full apology, which everyone understood. It's as much as could be expected given the complex dynamics at play. Catherine responded with equal grace and honesty. She thanked Camilla for the concern that had motivated the earlier visit, acknowledging that she knew the intentions had been good, even if the timing had been difficult. She also thanked her, indirectly, for respecting the boundaries that William had needed to establish. The conversation was carefully worded and diplomatic, but the underlying emotions were genuine on both sides. The visit lasted just under 2 hours, long enough to feel meaningful, but not so long as to exhaust Catherine. When Charles and Camilla prepared to leave, there were genuine smiles and promises to see each other again soon. William returned to say goodbye, his body language notably more relaxed than it had been when he greeted them. He walked them to their car, speaking quietly with his father about upcoming commitments and family schedules. As the car pulled away from Adelaide Cottage, Camilla felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The visit had gone better than she had dared hope. Catherine had been warm, welcoming, and genuinely kind, despite everything that had happened. Perhaps, Camilla thought, there was a path forward after all, a way to build a real relationship rather than just maintaining polite distance at formal family gatherings. In the weeks following the successful visit, atmosphere within the royal family began to shift in subtle but meaningful ways. Staff members noticed the change first, seeing it in small gestures and casual interactions that suggested deeper wounds were beginning to heal. The tension that had hung over palace corridors like an invisible fog seemed to be lifting gradually, though everyone remained cautious about celebrating too soon. Catherine continued to regain her strength day by day. She began taking on small duties again, brief phone calls with patronages, reviewing documents that required her attention, slowly rebuilding her capacity to engage with the work she loved. William watched her carefully, ready to step in if she pushed herself too hard, but increasingly confident that the worst was truly behind them. The children noticed the change in their mother most dramatically. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis had been subdued during her illness, their usual exuberance dampened by worry and the disruption to their normal routines. As Catherine grew stronger, their laughter returned to Adelaide Cottage, filling the rooms with a kind of joyful chaos that had been missing for too long. One afternoon, Catherine received an unexpected phone call. It was Camilla, reaching out personally rather than through intermediaries or formal channels. The conversation started awkwardly, both women uncertain about how to navigate this new territory. But gradually they found a comfortable rhythm, discussing safe topics like gardening and upcoming holidays, avoiding anything that might stir up difficult emotions. Before ending the call, Camilla mentioned that she was organizing a small charity event for one of her patronages and wondered if Catherine might be interested in attending. Whenever she felt ready to return to public duties, the invitation was casual, with no pressure attached, but it represented something significant. It was an olive branch extended with genuine warmth, an acknowledgement that they were family and could support each other's work even while navigating complex personal dynamics. Catherine promised to check her schedule and her doctor's recommendations, thanking Camilla for the invitation. After they hung up, she sat quietly for several minutes, thinking about the journey from that difficult afternoon when Camilla had been turned away to this moment of careful but real connection. Life within the royal family was never simple, but perhaps it didn't have to be as difficult as it sometimes seemed. William learned about the phone call when Catherine mentioned it casually over dinner. His initial instinct was protective concern, worry that his stepmother might be pushing for too much too soon. But seeing the pleased expression on his wife's face, the small smile that suggested she felt good about the interaction, he chose to trust her judgment. Catherine was the best judge of her own readiness for increased engagement with family and work. Meanwhile, public interest in Catherine's health remained intense. Every photograph, every sighting, every snippet of information was analyzed and discussed across media platforms and social networks. The palace's strategy of minimal information had created a vacuum that speculation rushed to fill. Some rumors were close to the truth, others wildly imaginative, but all contributed to a narrative that the royal family could only partially control. The decision was made to plan a carefully managed return to public life for Catherine. It would begin with a single appearance at a meaningful event, something connected to causes she cared deeply about. The communications team worked with William and Catherine to choose the perfect occasion, something that would demonstrate her recovery without demanding too much energy or exposure. Camilla's charity event emerged as a potential option. Attending would serve multiple purposes, showing family unity while also supporting important charitable work. The symbolism would not be lost on royal watchers. Appearing together at such an event would signal that any family tensions had been resolved, or at least managed effectively. But the decision ultimately rested with Catherine and her medical team, doctor's appointments, and consultations filled. Catherine's calendar as her team assessed whether she was truly ready for a return to public duties. The physical aspects of her recovery were only part of the equation. They also needed to consider the emotional and psychological demands of being in the public eye, managing the intense scrutiny that came with every royal appearance, handling the exhaustion that could follow even brief public engagements. The children had their own adjustments to navigate as their mother grew stronger. They had become accustomed to quieter routines, more time with their father, less spontaneous play with their mother. Now, as Catherine became more active in their daily lives again, everyone needed to find a new balance. George, as the eldest, seemed most aware of these shifting dynamics. sometimes watching his mother with a carefulness that made William's heart ache. Family gatherings became more frequent and relaxed. Charles and Camilla visited Adelaide Cottage several more times, and the initial stiffness of those early meetings gave way to more natural interactions. They discussed everyday topics like any family might, shared meals together, watched the children play in the garden. The complicated history never disappeared entirely, but it became less dominant in their present-day relationships. One significant breakthrough came during a conversation about royal duties and responsibilities. Catherine and Camilla found themselves discussing the unique pressures of being married into the royal family, the constant scrutiny, the loss of privacy, the challenge of maintaining individual identity while fulfilling public expectations. These shared experiences created an unexpected bond, a recognition that despite their different paths and histories, they faced similar challenges in their royal roles. William observed these developing connections with mixed feelings. He was genuinely pleased to see his wife building better relationships with his father and stepmother. The family unity was good for everyone, especially the children who benefited from seeing adults model healthy conflict resolution and relationship building. But a protective part of him remained vigilant, ready to step in if he sensed Catherine being hurt or taken advantage of in any way. The royal protection officer who had stopped Camilla that fateful afternoon found himself in an interesting position. He had become an inadvertent symbol of the incident, though no one discussed it with him directly. When he was on duty during subsequent family visits, there was always a moment of slight awkwardness when Camilla arrived, a shared memory that hung in the air unspoken. But she was always gracious to him, treating him with the same respect she showed all staff members. Behind closed doors, the royal household staff had their own opinions about everything that had transpired. Some sided firmly with William's protective stance. Others thought the situation could have been handled more diplomatically. Most simply hoped that the worst was over and normal operations could resume. The servants' gossip networks buzzed with information and speculation. Though everyone understood the importance of discretion when dealing with royal family matters, Catherine finally made her decision about Camilla's charity event. She would attend, but only for a limited time, and with the understanding that she could leave early if necessary. The announcement was made through official channels, and immediately the media coverage intensified. Headlines proclaimed the appearance a symbol of family reconciliation, though the palace refused to comment on such interpretations, maintaining their policy of minimal engagement with speculation about private family matters. The preparations for the event became elaborate. Despite everyone's intentions to keep things simple, Catherine's wardrobe was chosen carefully to strike the right tone, supportive but not overshadowing Camilla's role as the primary royal at her own event. Security protocols were reviewed and strengthened. Given the high level of public interest and the fact that this would be Catherine's first appearance after her extended absence from public life the night before the event, Catherine had difficulty sleeping. She was excited, but also nervous, aware that every aspect of her appearance and behavior would be scrutinized and judged. William stayed up with her, offering quiet reassurance and practical support. They discussed backup plans if she felt unwell, reviewed the schedule in detail, talked through various scenarios that might arise. His steady presence calmed her nerves gradually, reminding her that she did not have to face any of this alone. The morning of the charity event dawned bright and clear, as if nature itself wanted to support this important moment. Catherine woke early, her stomach fluttering with nervous energy, despite her best efforts to remain calm. She went through her morning routine slowly and deliberately, trying to conserve energy for the hours ahead. William hovered nearby, attentive but trying not to add to her stress with his own obvious concern. The children sensed something significant was happening. Over breakfast, they asked questions about where their mother was going and why she was dressed so nicely. Catherine explained in simple terms that she was going to help Camilla with an important event, that she was feeling well enough now to start doing her royal work again. The children seemed satisfied with this explanation, though George gave her an extra tight hug before she left. The drive to the event venue gave Catherine time to mentally prepare herself. She reviewed key information about the charity, the people she would be meeting, the schedule for the afternoon. but mostly she focused on her breathing, using techniques. Her doctors had taught her to manage anxiety and conserve energy. She had done this countless times before, but somehow today felt different. Weighted with additional significance beyond the normal demands of a royal engagement, Camilla was already at the venue when Catherine arrived, greeting early attendees and checking final arrangements with the event staff. When she received word that Catherine's car was approaching, she felt her own surge of nervousness. So much was riding on this afternoon going well, not just for the charity, but for their still fragile relationship. She positioned herself near the entrance, ready to welcome Catherine personally rather than leaving it to staff members. The moment Catherine stepped out of the car, camera flashes erupted like fireworks. Photographers who had been waiting for hours jockeyed for position, shouting requests for Catherine to look their way, to smile, to wave. She handled it with the practiced grace of someone who had been in the public eye for years. But those close to her could see the slight tension in her shoulders, the careful control in her movements that suggested she was working harder than she wanted to appear. Camilla moved forward immediately, greeting Catherine with genuine warmth and a supportive hand on her arm that the cameras captured from every angle. They exchanged a few quiet words that no one else could hear, then walked into the venue together. To observers, they looked like two women comfortable in each other's company, supporting each other's work with natural ease. The reality was more complex, but they were both committed to making this appearance successful. Inside the venue, Catherine met various supporters and beneficiaries of the charity. She listened to their stories with sincere interest, asked thoughtful questions, showed the kind of engaged compassion that had always characterized her approach to royal duties. Camilla watched from nearby, impressed by Catherine's ability to connect with people despite the obvious fatigue that was beginning to show around her eyes. The formal portion of the event included speeches from charity leaders and a presentation about upcoming initiatives. Camilla spoke eloquently about the importance of the work, thanking supporters for their generosity and commitment. Acknowledged Catherine's presence and thanked her for attending. The applause was genuine and enthusiastic. Catherine smiled and nodded graciously, careful not to draw too much attention away from Camilla's event. During a quiet moment, the two women found themselves briefly alone in a side room. Camilla asked honestly how Catherine was holding up, expressing concern that the event might be too demanding for her first public appearance. Catherine admitted she was tired but managing well, grateful for the support Camilla had shown throughout the afternoon. The conversation was brief but sincere, another small step toward genuine understanding between them. As the event progressed, William monitored updates from his office at Kensington Palace. He had wanted to attend, but decided his presence might create additional pressure and media attention that would overshadow the charity work. Staff members kept him informed of Catherine's condition, reporting that she was handling everything beautifully, but would likely need significant rest afterward. He felt proud of her courage, while simultaneously wishing she did not have to expend so much energy on public appearances while still recovering. The media coverage was extensive and largely positive. Headlines praised Catherine's return to public life, noted the apparent warmth between her and Camilla, and celebrated the important charitable work being highlighted. Some articles mentioned the earlier incident at Adelaide Cottage, contrasting that difficult moment with the current show of family unity. The palace communications team monitored everything closely, pleased with how the narrative was developing. After 2 hours, Catherine quietly signaled to her private secretary that she was ready to leave. The exit was managed smoothly, with Camilla walking her to the car and thanking her once more for attending. They embraced briefly, a gesture that felt genuine to both of them despite the cameras capturing every second. As Catherine's car pulled away, she leaned back against the seat with her eyes closed, exhausted but satisfied with how the afternoon had unfolded. The drive home felt longer than the journey there had been. Catherine dozed intermittently, her body demanding the rest it needed after such significant exertion. When she arrived back at Adelaide Cottage, William was waiting at the door. He helped her inside without fuss, reading her energy levels accurately and knowing she needed quiet and rest more than conversation or celebration. Over the following days, Catherine recovered from the exertion of the public appearance. She had pushed herself hard, and her body reminded her that recovery was not linear. that setbacks and difficult days would continue to occur. But she felt good about what she had accomplished, about the step forward she had taken both in her return to public life and in her relationship with Camilla. Camilla sent flowers next day with a note expressing her gratitude for Catherine's support and wishing her continued recovery. The gesture was thoughtful and appropriate, striking the right balance between warmth and respect for Catherine's ongoing need for rest. Catherine displayed the flowers prominently in the sitting room, a visible reminder of how far they had come from that difficult afternoon when a guard had stood between them. The charity event raised significant funds and awareness for important causes. The media attention generated by Catherine's appearance had brought additional focus to the work, demonstrating how royal involvement could amplify charitable efforts. Camilla was grateful for this outcome, while also recognizing the toll such appearances took on those who participated, especially someone still recovering from serious illness. Family dynamics continued to evolve in the weeks that followed. There were still awkward moments and careful navigation of sensitive topics, but the underlying tone had shifted from tension and hurt to cautious optimism and genuine effort. Charles felt relief that his wife and his son's wife were finding ways to coexist more peacefully, reducing the strain he had felt being caught between them. The royal protection officer, who had been at the center of the initial incident, watched these developments with quiet satisfaction. He had simply been doing his job, following orders to protect the princess during a vulnerable time. But he was human enough to feel pleased that the situation had resolved itself in a positive direction, that his moment of firm boundary setting had ultimately contributed to a better outcome for everyone involved. Staff members throughout the royal households noticed the improved atmosphere. Planning meetings ran more smoothly when they did not have to navigate competing interests or worry about creating awkward situations. Family events could be scheduled without the elaborate diplomatic maneuvering that had been necessary during the period of heightened tension. The daily work of supporting the royal family became slightly easier when the family members themselves were working together rather than at cross purposes. Catherine's doctors monitored her progress carefully, pleased with her physical recovery, but cautious about the pace of her return to full duties. They emphasized the importance of gradual increases in activity, proper rest between engagements, and attention to her body's signals about when she was pushing too hard. Catherine listened to their advice, having learned through difficult experience that ignoring medical guidance only led to worse outcomes in the long run. The children adapted to having their mother more active again, though they remained protective of her in sweet, age-appropriate ways. Prince Louis would bring her his favorite stuffed animal when she looked tired, insisting that it always made him feel better. Princess Charlotte drew pictures to cheer her up and proudly displayed them around the house. Prince George, older and more aware, sometimes reminded his siblings to be quiet so their mother could rest, taking on a small caretaker role that made William both proud and a little sad. 6 months after the incident at Adelaide Cottage, life had settled into a new rhythm that felt sustainable and healthier than what had existed before. Catherine had returned to a modified schedule of royal duties, carefully balanced with adequate rest and family time. She had learned important lessons about boundaries, priorities, and the necessity of protecting her own well-being in order to serve others effectively. The relationship between Catherine and Camilla had evolved into something neither woman had quite expected. They were not close friends, and probably never would be. Too much history and too many differences separated them for that kind of intimate bond. But they had developed genuine mutual respect, an understanding of each other's positions, and a commitment to supporting one another in their royal roles. That was perhaps more valuable than friendship would have been. They now spoke on the phone occasionally. It's usually about charitable work or family matters, sometimes just to check in. The conversations were pleasant and authentic, no longer weighted with the careful diplomacy that had characterized their earlier interactions. Camilla had learned to respect Catherine's boundaries and need for space. Catherine had learned to appreciate Camilla's genuine efforts to be supportive without being intrusive. William watched these developments with satisfaction and some surprise. He had not anticipated that such a difficult situation could lead to positive changes in family dynamics. His protective instincts toward Catherine remained strong, but he no longer felt the need to shield her from all contact with his stepmother. He had learned that Catherine was stronger than he sometimes gave her credit for, capable of navigating complex relationships while maintaining appropriate boundaries. The children benefited most from the improved family atmosphere. They saw their parents more relaxed, witnessed adults working through difficulties with grace and maturity, experienced the security that comes from stable family relationships. The lessons they absorbed during this time would shape their own approaches to conflict and relationship building as they grew older. Charles reflected often on how close the family had come to a deeper, more permanent rift. If William had remained completely rigid in his protective stance, if Camilla had allowed hurt feelings to harden into resentment, if Catherine had not possessed the grace to extend forgiveness and welcome reconciliation, things could have turned out very differently. He felt grateful for the wisdom and maturity all parties had ultimately shown. The Royal Protection Officer received a commendation for his professionalism during the initial incident and its aftermath. His superiors recognized that he had been placed in an extremely difficult position and had handled it with exactly the kind of discretion and adherence to duty that the role required. He accepted the recognition with his characteristic quiet dignity, never discussing the details publicly or using his moment in royal family drama for personal attention. Adelaide Cottage remained Catherine's sanctuary, a place where she could retreat from public demands and focus on family life. But it no longer felt like a fortress requiring absolute protection from all outsiders. The barriers that had been necessary during her most difficult days of illness had been gradually lowered as she regained strength and confidence. The cottage had evolved from a place of isolation to one of peaceful family living. Catherine's health continued to improve steadily. There were still difficult days when fatigue overwhelmed her, moments when she had to cancel plans or reduce activities to preserve her energy, but these episodes became less frequent and less severe over time. She learned to read her body's signals better, to pace herself more effectively, to ask for help when she needed it, rather than pushing through until she collapsed. The charity that had hosted the event where Catherine made her return appearance saw significant growth in support and recognition. The royal attention had brought new donors and volunteers, expanding their capacity to serve vulnerable populations. Both Catherine and Camilla continued to support the organization, sometimes appearing at events together, other times taking on separate engagements to maximize their impact. Media interest in the royal family's internal dynamics gradually shifted to other topics. New stories and scandals emerged to capture public attention, and the incident at Adelaide Cottage faded into the background of royal history. Occasionally, journalists would reference it when discussing royal relationships or Catherine's recovery journey. But it was no longer the pressing headline it had once been. Behind palace walls, the story lived on in different ways. Staff members who had been present during those tense weeks told the tale to newcomers, using it as an example of how family conflicts could arise and be resolved with dignity. The incident became part of institutional memory, a case study in navigating the complex intersection of personal relationships and public duties that defined royal life. William and Catherine's marriage had been tested by her illness and the surrounding complications. Some marriages might have fractured under such pressure, but theirs emerged stronger. They had learned to communicate more effectively about needs and boundaries, to support each other through impossible situations, to trust each other's judgment even when facing difficult decisions. The experience had matured their partnership in ways that years of easier circumstances never could have. As autumn arrived and the anniversary of that difficult afternoon approached, Catherine found herself thinking back on everything that had happened. She remembered very little of her worst days of illness, the time when William had been making difficult decisions to protect her. But she remembered clearly the moment when she learned what had transpired. Her initial shock, giving way to gratitude for her husband's fierce protection. She also remembered the awkwardness of those first conversations with Camilla after the incident, the careful dance of acknowledging hurt feelings while moving forward constructively. Most vividly, she remembered the moment at the charity event, when she and Camilla had stood side by side, presenting a united front to the world, while both knowing the complicated journey that had brought them to that point. Camilla's reflections on the anniversary were equally complex. She remembered the sting of rejection when the guard had stopped her, the humiliation of seeing the incident reported in newspapers, the difficulty of attending that first visit to Adelaide Cottage after everything that had happened. But she also remembered Catherine's genuine warmth during that visit, the gradual building of trust and understanding that had followed, the satisfaction of working together successfully at the charity event. The guard himself, when he thought about that afternoon, felt no regret about his actions. He had been given clear orders and had followed them precisely, exactly as his training and duty required. That he had become a footnote in royal family history was simply an occupational hazard. He had served with honor and professionalism, and that was what mattered to him. Looking forward, all members of the family understood that challenges would continue to arise. Royal life was inherently complicated, filled with competing demands and impossible expectations. But they had proven to themselves and each other that difficulties could be navigated, that relationships could heal, that family bonds could strengthen even after being tested severely. Catherine's health journey was far from over. She would continue to manage her condition carefully, balancing public service with self-care, accepting that she had limitations, while refusing to let those limitations define her entirely. William would continue to support her, while learning to trust her growing strength and resilience. The children would continue to grow up seeing their parents model healthy approaches to challenge and conflict. Camilla would continue her royal duties with the knowledge that she had weathered a significant test of her place in the family. She had been hurt but had not allowed that hurt to poison relationships permanently. She had shown grace in difficult circumstances and had been rewarded with genuine, if still somewhat reserved, acceptance from her stepson and his wife. Charles could look at his family with satisfaction, knowing that the difficult moments of the past year had ultimately brought everyone closer rather than driving them apart. The monarchy he would continue to lead was stronger when the family members supporting it could work together, with mutual respect and understanding, even when perfect harmony was impossible. The story that had begun with a guard's firm voice saying those fateful words at Adelaide Cottage's entrance had evolved into something far more complex and ultimately more hopeful than anyone could have predicted in that tense moment. It became a story about boundaries and respect, about protection and healing, about the possibility of building bridges, even across difficult history and hurt feelings. As winter approached and the family prepared for holiday gatherings, there was genuine warmth in their interactions. The upcoming celebrations would not be perfect. No family gathering ever was. But they would be authentic, marked by real affection and hard-won understanding. The incident at Adelaide Cottage had become part of their shared history, a chapter that was difficult but ultimately taught important lessons about love, duty, forgiveness, and the complicated beauty of family relationships that endure despite every test and challenge.